Former U.S. Ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul was in that prep session with President Biden, and he's also met with Putin. I spoke to him earlier about what Putin is looking to accomplish here and what President Biden should be prepared for. President Biden asked for this meeting. How does that affect the dynamic of what will happen?
Well, I think that creates expectations for the summit on the Biden side. Vladimir Putin didn't ask for it. All he has to do is show up, stand next to the President of the United States, and that's a win for him. That shows that the world is reaching out to him.
My colleague Keir Simmons did a lengthy interview with President Putin. What do you think that President Biden can learn from that interview?
Two things. One, President Putin is not constrained by the truth. And two, whataboutism, comparing things that have nothing to do with each other. President Biden needs to be prepared for both of those.
President Biden wants to find common ground on something. Does Putin need common ground? Does he need this relationship to get better?
No, he doesn't. And that's why he's feeling very snug about this meeting.
That's a major thing.
Yes. For him, he's already achieved what he wants. He doesn't need concrete outcomes with us. In fact, he needs us as an enemy, not as a cooperative partner. So I think for him, the stakes are pretty low.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.